Welcome. Let's talk while you're here. So, today I want to talk about self imposed limitations. The biggest thing about self imposed limitations is most of the time we're not aware that we even have self imposed limitations. I think it's mostly like a background thing that really requires some self reflection and conscious awareness to actually realize we have self imposed limitations. And when I'm talking about self imposed limitations, I'm not talking about limiting beliefs, even though limiting beliefs could be attributing to your self imposed limitations. What I mean by self imposed limitations is any limit, any rule, any standard that you impose on yourself, that you live by, that isn't really serving you in any way, but your mind has sort of come up with this limit and it's affecting how you live without even realizing it. So, let me give a few examples from my own life. When I wanted to change my life for the better, right? I mentioned this many times. I was depressed, miserable, stuck. I was sleeping late, waking up late. I wasn't doing anything meaningful. I was basically just distracted every day. And when I wanted to change my life, I had put this limit on myself without even realizing it. And that was this notion that I had to wake up at 7 a.m. in order to change my life for the better. I didn't realize this was a self imposed limit until I really thought about it. Waking up at 7 a.m. is a good goal to strive for, but in my circumstances, in my environment, waking up at 7 a.m. is just not feasible for me. It's not a viable option. The reason why waking up at 7 a.m. just wasn't feasible for me was because in order to do that, I had to sleep at 9 p.m. every day. And yeah, you might be wondering, do I actually sleep for 10 hours? Yes, I actually sleep for 10 hours. I usually require 10 hours of sleep, unfortunately. I can sometimes handle 8 or 9 hours of sleep, but usually it's 10 hours average. Anyway, so sleeping at 9 p.m. is what was not feasible for me. I live with my parents and they don't go to sleep until after 11 p.m. and the TV is on until late into the night. So even if I went to bed at 9 p.m., I wouldn't be able to sleep because of the noises and sounds and the environment itself. Sleeping at 9 p.m. just wasn't feasible for me. Because I set this standard for myself, I wasn't able to actually start changing my life because in my mind, if I didn't wake up at 7 a.m., it wasn't worth it. In my mind, if I didn't wake up at 7 a.m., then there's no point in like changing my lifestyle and like changing my habits. It took a while to realize I had created this limit for myself. It wasn't until I actually reflected about this limit and thought about it that I realized my parents aren't going to change their habits for me. My parents aren't going to suddenly stop watching TV after 9 p.m. So the only thing I can do is adjust my habit in a feasible way where I can still get enough sleep and I can wake up early enough to actually implement the habits that I want to implement. So what was feasible for me then? What was feasible is going to bed at 10 p.m. or 10:30 p.m. and waking up at 9 a.m. instead of 7 a.m. So all I had to do was realize I had imposed this limit on myself. Think about the alternative, the next best thing that I can actually implement. And the next best thing was to go to sleep a bit earlier than my parents and wake up at 9 a.m. So yeah, that was the self-imposed limit I had on myself that I was able to resolve, thankfully, by waking up at 9 a.m. instead of 7 a.m. And, I was actually able to change my routine and daily habits. A more recent example, in my case, is how I show up on YouTube. I've realized recently that I've created two self imposed limits on how I show up on YouTube. And it took a bit of thinking to realize this as well. The first one is that I've kind of limited myself to showing up seriously and like philosophically on YouTube. I've kind of limited myself to only talking about philosophical topics or ideas or self improvement, self help, things like that. And because I've limited myself in this way, I kind of feel the need to remain serious, remain philosophical um, when I film videos, and that's kind of prevented me from talking about lighter topics. It's also prevented me from making jokes, like being silly, goofy, and like being more entertaining, I guess. Like, it's kind of prevented me from showing up in a lighter way online. And honestly, I don't know how to solve this. I think I've really conditioned myself to show up seriously like this since like high school. I don't know how to solve for that. I don't like being limited to just my serious philosophical side, but at the same time, I kind of like feed off different. That sounds weird. At the same time, I usually show my lighter, sillier, goofier self when I'm interacting with people that have a similar energy. It feels like my wit, my silliness, my lighter side only comes out when other people are present and their energies match that silliness. And I can't be witty unless I have someone to be witty with, and unless someone said something and I can have a witty response to. So it's hard to be silly goofy all by myself. Even though you are watching and we are technically hanging out together, it's asynchronous and I can't feel your energy. I can't reply to you in a witty way. So it's a struggle. It's a struggle. Sometimes I just feel like I'm on this like virtual soapbox and I'm just like talking to crickets about unsolicited philosophical advice. So I don't know what the solution would be. If you have advice, if you have a possible solution for this self-imposed limit, please let me know. I would really appreciate that. The second self-imposed limit that I put on myself was again related to YouTube. I realized I've limited myself to only talking about things if I can actually implement them beforehand, in the sense that I've kind of limited myself to prioritizing self-improvement because I want to change my life for the better. And while I'm doing that, I want to share with you guys what works and what doesn't work, at least in my case, so that you can be inspired to either try certain methods or approach things in a certain way to also change your life for the better. So I kind of created this self-imposed limit of I'm this like guinea pig for myself, and I have to constantly implement different things to improve my life and change my life for the better. And if I'm not actively implementing different methods, if I'm not actively changing my life for the better, then I feel like I have nothing to share with you guys, or that, I have nothing valuable to share on YouTube anymore, because the only thing I can share of value is how I've improved my life, what methods I used, how to change your life for the better. So I think I've kind of created this self-imposed limit on how I can film videos, when I can film videos. I can only film videos if I have improved my life in a certain way, so that I can share that with you and, um, share what worked for me. So that's a self-imposed limit I just recently realized. And it's weird because I value authenticity. I value showing up as authentically as possible. And that requires vulnerability. I have to be vulnerable in ways that aren't necessarily comfortable. And that includes sharing my journey, even if it isn't going as fast as I want it to. So, in order to show up authentically and be vulnerable with you, I have to accept that my journey will be slow at times, that I won't improve as drastically as I want to. I might even take a few steps back at times. You know, Progress isn't linear. I have talked about this before, but I really need to remind myself, and I hope you remind yourself as well. Progress isn't linear. Sometimes you take a few steps forward, and other times you take a couple steps back. Progress isn't linear, so right now I'm currently not progressing. It feels like I've taken a couple steps back, in the sense that I'm not waking up exactly at 9 a.m. anymore. It's more like 10 a.m. And I've been feeling more and more distracted lately, even though I'm trying to use timers and gamified Notion templates, and I've put limits on my app use. It seems like the methods I've been using to be more productive aren't working anymore. I feel really distracted, and I'm not doing as much work during the day as I hope to. Because I'm so distracted, I usually end up only working for about 2 hours. And because I feel like I've taken a couple steps back, where I'm at now doesn't feel good enough to share on YouTube for some reason. And realizing this self-imposed limit is kind of the reason why I'm talking about it right now, so that I can move past this limit and actually share my journey authentically and vulnerably. I don't want to feel like an imposter talking about self-help advice when I don't implement it myself. I don't want to talk about self-improvement methods and approaches and techniques if I'm not implementing and experimenting with them myself, and observing the results of those techniques and methods. I don't want to talk about anything I don't vouch for personally. So I can only talk about what I've experienced so far and what my journey has been so far. I think realizing the self-imposed limits that I put on myself is the biggest step to distancing myself from those self-imposed limits. And if there is a better alternative, if there is an option that makes me better off, then I can certainly act on that. Now that I'm aware of all these limits and rules and standards that I've set for myself, I can choose differently if I feel like they're not contributing or serving me in any way. I can choose to live differently now. I can choose a better alternative. I can choose the simplest and best solution for myself if I'm not happy with those self-imposed limits. I think we see that a lot on YouTube. If a YouTuber became famous due to their comedy, due to their jokes, they then create that self-imposed limit of always making funny videos, right? On the flip side, if a YouTuber is always teaching you something, they then create a self-imposed limit of always having to teach something. So I think we really have to take the time to think about our current circumstances, think about how we're doing a certain thing, and if we always do a certain thing the same way, if we always show up in the same way, if we always live life in the same way, and we're not happy about it, there might be a self-imposed limit or rule or standard that you have unconsciously created for yourself. And you really need to take the time to reflect and realize what those self-imposed limits are, and question whether you want to continue living with those self-imposed limits. And if you don't want to continue living with those self-imposed limits, you need to really reflect and think about the alternatives to that limit. What is the best solution to that limit? What's the option that gives you the most freedom and enjoyment and contentment? Self-imposed limits could be in any aspect of your life. It could be in how you show up, how you interact with others. It could be how you dress. It could be where you live. It could be how you approach your career. It could be anything. Are you tired of living in a certain city and you have the money to move? Then why are you limiting yourself to that city? Let's say, for example, you live in New York City, right? You live in New York. You might be one of those people who unconsciously live there just for the vibes, like just for the prestige and image of being a New Yorker. I've seen that online quite a few times, where being able to say you're a New Yorker kind of prevents you from moving to a different place that would actually make you happier. I think a lot of New Yorkers create this self-imposed limit of staying and living in New York, even if it makes them miserable, because at least they can say they're living in New York. I don't know if that makes sense. So if you're living in New York or a big city that makes you miserable, that makes you unnecessarily stressed and overwhelmed, and that keeps you stuck in a certain lifestyle, maybe you have created that limit for yourself. Maybe you have imposed the limit of staying in this city, even if you have the finances to move somewhere else. You might be scared of moving to a new city or a new country or a new village because there's a lot of uncertainty and everything would be new, and you don't know if you can handle it. So the self-imposed limit has valid reasons for being there, in the sense that there might be anxiety, there might be fears, doubts preventing you from moving somewhere else. But sometimes we just have to take a step back and really reflect on our current circumstances. Are we content and satisfied with our current circumstances? Are we satisfied with our current life? If the answer is no, then what are the self-imposed limits and rules and standards you have created for yourself that have resulted in this current lifestyle, this current situation? And are there any alternatives to these limits and rules? Are there any solutions and options that would create more satisfaction and contentment and enjoyment and freedom in your life? Is there anything that will make you feel free and satisfied? If so, how can you implement this new option? And everyone has a different set of self-imposed limits. It's hard to say you have to do this first and then this is the solution to that, and then this is how you get rid of your self-imposed limits. It's hard to solve for them in an objective theoretical way, but I think all that really matters is, are you able to take a step back and are you able to reflect on all the different ways that you are limiting yourself, all the different ways that you have set absurd rules and standards for yourself? Are you able to become aware of all these things? Are you able to reflect on possible solutions? That's the biggest thing, I think. In what ways are you limiting your personality, your authenticity, your expression, your creativity, your life? In what ways are you limiting your life? And how can you set yourself free from those self-imposed shackles, those self-imposed limits? I think deep down we know what to do and how to free ourselves from those self-imposed limits. So let me know what you think. If you have any self-imposed limitations, feel free to share them in the comment section. Yeah, that'll be all for today. Please let me know what you think. If there are any self-imposed limitations, rules, standards that you just realized you have, please let me know. Please write it down in the comments. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider checking out my other videos and please consider subscribing to my channel. I would be very, very grateful. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you. Take care. Bye.